The Discourse starts right now with Cheryl Oates and Erika Barudis.
Welcome back to The Discourse on the eve of the next federal election.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is widely expected to call the election on Friday, March 23rd, sending Canadians to the polls in late April or early May. And who can blame the guy? The latest polls from Angus Reid and Leger have the Liberals back in majority territory. Erika?
Yeah, so the poll that you're talking about has the Liberals sitting at 42% and the CPC with a drop to 37%. And that was a survey of 4,000 Canadians. So this is a huge swing for the Liberals. If I was them, I'd be calling the election. I've heard rumors as early, as the Sunday the 23rd, as Carney is prancing around over in Europe right now. We'll come back and probably, yeah, that's how I envision him after his press release where he got all heated and angry and then was like, now he's skipping back. But he is coming back. They're in good position. They've basically created where the NDP is nothing now at 9%. I think that's probably the lowest we've seen them in years. And yeah, I expect them to call the election. Now, I will say this is such a huge swing in the upward trajectory for them that can equally go back as quickly. And so I think my party has some work to do. But I do think that this is, again, that still a little bit of that honeymoon hangover for Carney, as well as, something that upward trajectory. And when he starts talking, as he did earlier this week, he might go down in the polls.
It's interesting, though, because I was talking about this earlier where a conservative said, well, that arrogant interaction with the media isn't going to help him. And I started laughing because I'm like, arrogant interaction with the media? There is one king of arrogant
They just mean you can't have two. It looks silly and you're copying.
The guy who eats apples into microphones when media question him. Pierre Poilievre is the king of arrogance to the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. So if this is the new talking point from the Conservatives, I don't think it's going to hold much water.
I don't think it is. And I don't think it should be. And I also don't think that the CPC can continue on as they have. They've got to pivot, just like Ross and them carrying the couch up in Friends of pivot. That's what the Conservatives, I know. I was like, I hope that's a soundbite somewhere. But that's what they need to do. They need to, you've been critical that their soundbites aren't resonating. They've got to put, the proof in the pudding of their policies and start stepping up could be the individual to have those tariff conversations. Because if we're looking at issues specific, we've also seen some polling results come out on issues influencing vote, and the highest one right now from voter intention, even though I will say it's very short-lived potentially, is the dealing with the U.S. And President Trump, second to the economy. So if those even close a little bit, I think that the Conservatives are in a good position to talk more about the economy. But I think right now people aren't looking at Pierre Poilievre as maybe the best suited to negotiate with the U.S. And Carney has definitely really leveraged that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, across polls, and there's a bunch of polls that have recently come out across polls when Canadians are asked who is best to deal with President Trump, Mark Carney is the obvious choice among Canadians at this point in time. I mean, the question is both this latest poll from Angus Reid and the poll from Leger both have the Conservatives on this upward trend, this really, really fast upward trend that now have them in majority territory to win the next election. But I think the question is always, do we believe it? And, polls aren't always accurate. I just lived through a Saskatchewan campaign where had the polls been accurate, we would have formed a majority government. Saskatchewan would have been a great day, but instead we fell 4 seats short. So do we believe it? And then my other question is, we've watched the Conservatives sort of bide their time until what they thought would be their sort of coronation to power in this election, and everything has shifted. So I'm really interested in how Conservatives are feeling about all of this and whether they believe it.
Yeah, I don't think it's accurate. I think a few things. One, as I've said, it's coming off a honeymoon phase. He hasn't really addressed that big question of how am I going to deal with Trump? We both know what feels like a really short period for voters of an election writ dropping to E-Day. So much can happen. Even look at how you were positioned in NDP in 2023. Week 1 was good for us. Week 2 was horrible. And then we bounced back, and you guys were supposed to win that election and didn't end up coming up till week 3, were we not really pulling ahead of Rachel Notley and the Alberta NDP. So I do think that there's still a significant amount of time for the Conservative Party to gain back voter support. Was I nervous that if that was actually the election result of how many seats the Conservatives would have had for just internal party dynamics? I still think they can pull it off. I just think that they've got to pivot a little bit on what they're talking about, because now it's like the real time where people are listening, as opposed to what we saw from Pierre, which he's been campaigning. Like, this is a really long time for him to campaign. And I hope he's got that gas in the tank that we've seen from him, but this is still a long ways to go to becoming the prime minister. And it's probably even a harder game than he ever envisioned when even 3 months ago.
Yeah. And like everyone always says, campaigns matter. This campaign's really going to matter. The issues are front and center in terms of what Canadians are talking about, what Canadians care about, what is affecting their everyday lives. It's going to be really hard for the electorate to ignore this election, because it's going to be focused on our trade war with the United States. So like, truthfully, when you see polls shift this fast, they can shift back just as fast. But I think there are a couple of underlying factors here. One is that the Liberals are currently leading, if you look at these polls, currently leading in Quebec and Ontario. So although the Conservatives are popular across the prairies, we know there's a lot more seats in Quebec and Ontario than there are in across the prairies and in Western Canada. So that's one thing. And then the thing that I find the most interesting, that I find is probably a better predictor of how this election is going to go, is the favorability numbers for both candidates. So when you look at how people feel, so if a pollster calls you and says, how do you feel about this candidate? Do you feel very favorable about them? Do you feel kind of? Are you very frustrated with them or kind of frustrated with them? When you look at Poilievre's very unfavorable numbers, so the people who really, really don't like him, they're double Carney's. And granted, not all Canadians know who Mark Carney is yet, but those negative numbers for Pierre Poilievre are going to play a real role in this election when Canadians think of who they want to stand up to Donald Trump, and who they think is best to lead Canada forward through this crisis.
Yeah, so I do think Pierre, I mean, he's more of a divisive character. I don't think people besides Carney's resume really know him. I will say I don't know him that well. And I did watch in his media availability when we in England, like yells at Stephanie, or like is very aggressive, even to Rosie Barton, who's a pretty good Liberal loyalist with the CBC. Like, she's usually very, very fair with the Liberals and the government. And he was just very abrasive and apprehensive. Now, I'm not saying that Pierre isn't and how he deals with media, but I think people were looking for a different tone. And I think if Mark Carney continues this, I'm very happy, because I think it's showing maybe who he really is, because he hasn't had that much exposure. And I do hope that the economy also becomes more of an issue on that long term. Who do we want to be prime minister? Because I do think that there's a little bit more play for the Conservatives. I do want to ask you, though, well, two things. One, you're wearing red today. So your party's dying. You're down at like 9%. Like, is there an appetite from the left to be anti-Pierre in voting strategically? And then the second piece is on Carney's carbon tax. When he came out, like we talked about last week episode, the consumer-based carbon tax, I've seen a lot of economists, people within the energy sector saying that, okay, right, but he's not going to cancel the carbon tax entirely. And what that will ultimately do is just tax or cost the consumer the same price indirectly. So have you seen anything on that? And do you think that that message is going to be critical in this election, or do you think people just don't care about the carbon tax anymore?
So on the first question,
it was very loaded, so I get that.
So there's a lot in there. On the first, to your very first question, this shirt is just what was at the front of my closet today. So no hidden meanings in my shirt today. But on the second part of that question, I do think that there's an appetite among New Democrats, especially in the West, especially on the prairies, to, although like I've been a New Democrat supporter for a long time, I have worked on campaigns across the prairies. I have been loyal to this party for a long time, but I really, really, really do not want Pierre Poilievre to be prime minister. And so, yeah, I would consider strategically voting in this election. I've up until now lived in the last few federal elections in NDP strongholds. And so my vote was a no-brainer. Of course, if I was living in Edmonton, Strathcona still, I would, of course, be voting NDP. But when we're thinking about what is our best bet to keep the Conservatives out of power, which is really important to me, I will think about strategically voting in this election.
Can I just say first how cute it is that you got to like vote for your actual boss? Like I've never, and I don't mean cute
It was
like
only
in
in the
a
federal, not in the
Oh, okay.
provincial.
I thought you meant. I was like, that's actually kind of cool that you get to vote for your boss because I would have thought you lived downtown when you were in Edmonton, and then federally, not to tell people where you live. Are you part of Calgary Center? Yep. Okay, so that's that's going to be a hunting ground too. So even for you, your vote might matter even more.
Yeah,
than just
for sure.
yeah.
For sure. And then on your second question, like on this carbon tax issue, this has been the Conservatives' main point. It has been what they have been rallying support around. It is what so many Canadians have cared so deeply about. Get rid of the carbon tax, axe the tax. This has been Pierre Poilievre's entire personality since he became leader. And now the carbon tax is gone. Mark Carney, in one of his first acts as prime minister, has taken the carbon tax down to zero. And
But
I
it's
think
been corrected. It wasn't an order in council. It's
oh
not
God,
removing the
I do
legality.
not care about this.
But I know you
who does
don't
care about this?
I think there's a lot of people. I think that that's a opportunity that's like it's still going to tax you. Like this is a version.
What is going to tax
I
you?
think. Well, I just explained it that the indirectness of like you're going to tax all of these businesses, or they haven't explained what they're going to do.
What
so
are
they
you
could go
saying
higher
is going to
taxes.
happen?
Is that they're going to increase on businesses as opposed to consumers and business. But he hasn't said he's not going to do it, and he hasn't said he's eliminated it. He hasn't even made it law.
That's a ridiculous argument. When we have had Pierre Poilievre go for 2 years yelling axe the tax, saying he has no plan in terms of what will happen to backstop the budget or what will happen to fight climate change. Pierre Poilievre has said absolutely nothing. Mark Carney actually got rid of the carbon tax, and the first thing you can say is
he didn't legally get rid of it. He said he will,
Erika,
and he's campaigning
there'll be no carbon
on
tax next month. April
on
1st,
consumers,
no
not
tax.
on businesses, and not even like a structure or plan to change what it looks like now.
Okay,
so again, I think that's really hard for the Conservatives to get a message out because it's semantics.
Yeah, I think
but
that's
it's not getting rid of the carbon tax. So Carney has to get out saying that.
Are you saying that Pierre Poilievre has been campaigning on getting rid of industrial carbon pricing as well?
Okay, so Pierre Poilievre actually has come out and in a press conference this week has said, "Today I'm announcing that a Common Sense Canada first Conservative government will repeal the entire carbon tax, including the federal backstop that requires provinces to impose industrial taxes. There will be no taxes on consumers, no taxes on Canadian industries. Instead, provinces will continue to have the freedom to address this issue how they like, but there will be no federal obligation to impose the tax. We will also axe the tax on steel, aluminum, natural gas, food production, concrete, and other industries. And instead of taxes, we'll use the technology. So technology, not taxes, in the way that to fight climate change and protect our environment."
Okay. Well, so basically he's saying he'll remove the backstop, that no one will be obligated to have an industrial carbon price, although I think it's likely that provinces do keep some industrial carbon pricing.
But he's putting the decision back to the provinces, whether you like that or not. But he is taking, I think he did need to differentiate because you are right. Carbon tax, axe the tax has been his campaign. So he needed to continue to be able to say that and be clear on what his policy, how it would differentiate from Carney.
Yeah.
How do you feel about his policy? Are you going to vote for him now?
I'm not.
Shocking.
But I do think that the Conservatives, I mean, of course I'm biased, but I think it looks a little desperate. I think that the Conservatives have had this great talking point that Canadians, it really resonates with Canadians for 2 years. Mark Carney took that off the table on day one. And so now the Conservatives are scrambling to say, okay, well, what about his disclosure? Okay, well, what about the industrial carbon pricing? What about this? What about this? Hoping that something sticks in the way that axe the tax did. And in my opinion, I just don't think these things stick. I think they're a long shot.
And it'll be interesting, again, like right now, that's not what Canadians care about. So on the mass of this poll, if we're operating on that, I do think that they need to start talking about how they'll work with international trades, with our partners to the south, with the provinces as well going forward, because as much as I wish this election was on the carbon tax or was on who can better run in the economy, right now it's on Trump and the tariffs. And I don't think that I think it makes it an even playing field for the Conservatives and Liberals.
I feel like you should be doing a happy dance. All you wanted all this time
was
no consumer carbon tax. And now there's no consumer carbon tax. You should be pumped.
That's like you being pumped and celebrating this budget because it wasn't super conservative. It's like a half fist pump. I'm glad that it's not breaking on the backs of Canadians. However, I still am supportive of the Conservatives and what they're going to do. It worked in 2019 to repeal the carbon tax. I'm pleasantly optimistic that it'll work in 2023.
I'm just picturing the photo op that Pierre Poilievre would have done had he had the chance to kill the carbon tax himself, with a proper axe in his hands, probably like a tight shirt on, like literally axing the tax. It would have been great, but now that is lost.
Did you just indirectly say that you want to see Pierre in a tight shirt?
I didn't say I wanted to see any of it. I'm
or
just saying,
directly.
I'm sure the party has dreamed about this moment for a really long time, and now there's just no fanfare. It's just done.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this last week. He did take the wind out of the sails for a lot of the Conservatives. They've got to pivot. They've got to talk directly to Canadians about the issues that matter. I'm sure there's a lot of polling going on internally in parties for what people care about, what they need to talk about. Like you said, in Ontario and Quebec, it's just a kind of a reminder for Western Canada that it does suck that sometimes we are forgotten just based on our electoral system, the seat count. But I do think, coming back to Alberta, I do think that it'll be interesting on some of those ridings where there is a strong NDP candidate, there's a Liberal candidate, and then a strong CPC candidate, like how these will actually fold and if the left collapses to the Liberals in a strategic voting, because as of right now, we have 2 NDP and 2 Liberals in Alberta. And I don't know if the Liberals are really loved, but those 2 candidates, they both have their own little scandals, all of the Randys.
Yeah. So here we go.
Yeah.
By this time next week, we will be into a federal election, and probably for the first time in our generation, at least, this entire election is going to be overshadowed by the threat from the United States. I mean, Mark Carney is going to have to continue to do prime ministerial things at a time when typically we're in caretaker mode, and it's going to be overshadowed by Canada's place in the New World Order. So
yeah,
it'll be
it's a quick election, right? Like all of it's unprecedented. A new leader, a new prime minister. I mean, we've seen that in Alberta before but this is even quicker. It's like 6 months with Danielle Smith, 6 days with basically, I mean, a little bit more, but it sounds catchier, with Mark Carney choosing to drop the writ ahead of others, taking that when they return to the House and calling a non-confidence, because I think that has a different message than we called it on our own. And I just think there's a lot of unprecedented things happening, like, I don't even know where the NDP sit with all other candidates. I know the CPC still have a few to go. They're probably done by then.
The NDP have more today than they did at this point in 21.
Okay, good. Yeah, but they still don't have any money. And they're down to
they plan to spend the maximum or close to the maximum. So
yeah. So I mean, again, like all of these things we will see and be able to watch, and we'll break it down for you. We know that we're, traditionally more Alberta focused, and we're getting to that right next. But this is something we can't not cover, and we'll see where Cheryl lands if she's wearing orange on what I think might be like May 5th. I'm just guessing on when the election is, Cinco de Mayo. But that we'll see, and we'll see if I, vote Conservative.
So spoiler bet my money alert, on it. I don't own an orange shirt, just not my color.
Does it look
so
bad
don't
with your
wait.
Skin tone?
Yeah. So don't wait for me to be wearing an orange shirt.
Okay, you could just wear a black one for when Pierre wins and you're upset. All right, as I said, we're coming back to Alberta and the latest on what Cheryl tried to get me to say in our run of show, her little alliteration, the allegations against the UCP. So just to bring you back up to speed, the province has filed its statement of defense, which happened last week in the lawsuit initiated by Athana Mentzelopoulos, the former CEO of AHS, who was fired earlier this year in January. Mentzelopoulos filed a $1.7 million for wrongful dismissal suit earlier this year, claiming that she was fired after raising concerns and starting an investigation into procurement processes, alleging people inside the government were manipulating those processes.
Okay, so the government...
I was very fact-based.
Very fact-based. The government, this long-awaited statement of defense, so Athana Mentzelopoulos has filed her statement of claim. This is the government's official response
that we've been
filed
wanting.
in court.
I'm have been wanting
it here. This is crazy. This is a crazy statement of defense. When you hold it up...
Tell me more.
I'm going to make a prediction right now. I don't think this was written in a way that the government ever intended to take it to court. I think this is a government story. They thought they would get better press out of it than doing nothing, and they're going to settle. There's no way this goes to court, because when you hold this statement up next to Athena Mentzelopoulos', which is detailed, she has a very detailed statement of claim. And you could predict that every single thing in her statement of claim could be proven. It's possible she has the documents. It's possible she has the receipts. It's possible she could prove every single thing. When you look at the government's statement of defense, they are saying things like she was weaving a narrative. She was infatuated and obsessed with her investigation. I can't imagine how you could possibly prove those things. I can't imagine this playing out in court. It would be terribly damaging for the government, and it would be sensationalized by the media. I don't think they ever plan to see this through in court.
So a few things. One, I don't read a lot of statement of claims and statements of defense. And I don't think you do either, but like I'm just going to only speak for myself. And so it's not like I know traditionally what these look like. We have discussed that her statement of claim was actually also very different and unique, and possibly her strategy in wanting it to go to court or wanting the narrative to get out there, because she did name people as opposed to what you'll see is named the plaintiff throughout the entire statement of defense, not using her name, sometimes using her title. I do think that there was some synonyms used that didn't really, like to your point, demonstrated a desire for exaggeration or for a little bit of bravado, as opposed to like we're talking about a fact base. Both, I think, are very much like, if I was a person that doesn't read these like I am, I felt like it was very like, he said, she said type side. Like I looked at them both back and forth. Yeah. But like, it looks very much like, okay, what did this resolve? I don't think it got anyone anywhere. Like, I don't think this was a slam dunk for the government. I don't think it made them look any worse, though. They did put it out. I had to download it on Dropbox, which I thought was weird.
I did too.
I was like, big file. But it was put out by the Minister of Justice. So obviously not on the claim, but as the Minister of Justice for Alberta, when the government and the Crown was the one the claim was about. But it is, written on behalf of AHS as well as Adriana LaGrange, the Minister of Health. So it is comprehensive that way, because another thing to mention to our listeners is that the people that are given the claim, they are the only ones writing a statement of defense. So we are not going to see a statement of defense from other individuals named in that. And maybe because she used names and specific reference, that it was confusing that would be the case. But we will only see the response from the government if individuals, I understand, want to put out their own personal statement about being named in it. Very different. But we are now into RCMP investigation. We're into like Auditor General and independent studies, internal reviews, all of this, that I'm sure everyone's very quiet until called upon. It is like a very quiet classroom until you're not raising your hand.
But it's likely that all of the people named in it will be involved in discovery. They'll be involved in the case.
They
in
will.
Some aspect,
I have no doubt. They probably have already been reached out to by different bodies and to go into interviews under oath, et cetera. Everyone's kind of fair game, from my understanding, is anyone in government, anyone obviously named, like all of those people will then have to go through this process of truth and conversations under oath so that we get to the full truth, whether that's good, bad, for whomever.
The other crazy thing about this statement of defense that I thought is that it's sort of like it goes back and forth. Like the government makes the case that it's isn't
like
a party.
Conversation.
Well, it's a conversation, but it's also like the government makes the case that it's not a party to this, that the AHS procurement process happened within AHS, and it was AHS procurement process that Athena Mentzelopoulos has a problem with, except that the government ordered the procurement process to happen a certain way and then allegedly fired Mentzelopoulos for not following through with what the government had ordered, which is all in their statement of defense. It's just like very convoluted. It's very contradictory. And it does read like a story, like a narrative that to me, it reads like, here's our chance to put our own spin on the media, and then we're going to settle.
Do you think that's because you don't believe the government? And I'm not asking you to but is it because you have a bias, or is it because you have said multiple times that you do, I'm just trying to understand the lens you're coming at, because I'm like, I don't think this was great.
It doesn't read like a lawyer wrote it. It reads like the government trying to have their spin in the media, trying to tell a certain side of the story, trying to get a few better stories out there before they settle and pay out Athena Mentzelopoulos for an undisclosed amount and get her to sign an NDA so she can never talk about this again, which is what I think is going to happen.
I think both were kind of written very narrative storytelling. So I don't think that the government is the only one here that possibly wrote this unique to
But I
how
think she can
statements and
prove
claims.
hers.
Well, and we'll see. Maybe the government would argue the same. She was just
How
more,
are
I
they
think,
going to prove
detailed.
she was infatuated with her investigation?
Maybe. Well, there was a whole
She
text
wrote
message
love
thread
notes,
that they
like,
put in the statement of
but
defense. Who knows what else is out there? Like, I'm just going to
I
say
know,
let's wait and see, because
that in
I think
itself,
both of these things are like black and white.
but
Someone here is not telling the truth.
even if you had text messages, how could you prove someone was infatuated with their investigation?
Well, this is
You
where I
couldn't.
think like the synonym choice is maybe not ideal. However, I think that they were working against like this is about a wrongful dismissal suit, right? And so the way they wrote it, and I was sitting there being like, but I feel like there's more, but I feel like there's, and then I had to remind myself that the statement of defense is only in response to the statement of claims. So when they have to bring forward their story, they're not telling the whole bravado, which I think Athana brought forward, because she's telling the entire scope of it and all these different things that she says is impacting why she was terminated. They're saying she wasn't fulfilling her mandate. So I did see them try to come back to that. Do I agree that I think it was not written in a way that maybe I thought it was going to be? I thought it was going to be like dates and times and facts and this and that. And so I
Like
was a little
Athanas.
surprised with. No, because Athana also was like, and then this person who you usually don't name said this, and this, and this, and like quotation. Anyways, I just think both were from also hearing from lawyers, they're both uniquely written. And so again, but either way, I think what we can look at is this is like one side and another, and they are very different. So it is going to come to what's the next step as they discover more. Is the government seeing that they're in a position where they do settle? We'll see. Are they in a position where they are able to showcase that Athana was in a position where she was not fulfilling her mandate and that she was terminated for exactly what they're saying she was terminated for and nothing else? We'll see. But it is, I was really hoping that like this statement of defense was going to shut it all down. I don't think that happened.
I think it did the opposite, actually,
And
which I'm not sure they could have avoided.
It did not.
Yeah. This
Perhaps,
is another day, another story. I think.
And every one of these reminders, now we're having like, you're going to hear speculation of, oh, this person was called, this person was talked to, these people are now in the questions. Like, so if I'm going back to, and I wasn't involved in any of the RCMP investigation, I came in as president and it had already happened because it was the leadership. So I actually was never approached by the RCMP because I wasn't involved in any of it, even though I was at the time of all this lovely stuff, the sitting president of the UCP.
Is that what it says on your resume? Not involved in any RCMP investigation.
Never called. Yeah. And never been sued, knock on wood. But no, yeah. And then so I lived, but it was still like something that we all had to carry that burden every time that there was speculation or this person or the news talked to someone that they somehow got wind that person was asked questions. I do think in that case, it was a huge, like, prolonged spray and pray process. This one, again, there's a lot of people that can be in that firing line, but I think that list is far, far shorter than random people involved in campaign tactics of like hosting an event for your voting ballot or something, right? Like this is, I think, quite a bit different. However, the rolling of content and the rolling of the conversation, and again, the potential perception it could have, I mean, nothing was proven, and it still carried us into 2019. And if we weren't in such a, Albertans wanting change from the NDP and Jason Kenney looking like that savior, it might have impacted the results.
It was also it was hard for people to understand.
Mhm.
Like it was a very tough case for people to understand. I think
and it wasn't government, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think in this case, the RCMP has the ability to do something that the Auditor General has less ability to do, that this civil claim will not necessarily uncover, and that the Ethics Commissioner isn't going to look at, which is the RCMP has the ability to really follow the money. Like when we're talking about 12%, And I keep looking at the comments where people are like, Cheryl, read this, read this, read this. The 12% has been uncovered. It hasn't. It hasn't. Point me to who owns the 12%. We don't
There's
know who owns
people
the
with
12%.
12% a part of a bigger bunch, right? Like, is
Yes.
that where people are
Yes.
misleading?
But if you look at what's
misled?
been covered so far, the 12% ownership
We're
has not
sitting
been
at a
uncovered.
solid 88%.
And so if we're talking about the Athana Mensalapis has alleged that the government was manipulating contracts. For whom? Like, I want to know for whom. And that's something that we haven't uncovered. The RCMP could uncover that, and that could potentially lead to criminal charges depending on how it turns out. And that the public will understand that. That is something that it's not like a leadership race. The public will understand that. And I do believe it would really stick to this government if that was how this all ended.
Yeah, and maybe that's where, like you said, I'm not saying it's ending in settlement. I think that the government is confident that they're in the right. They've done nothing wrong. That's what we've seen from their media conversations. Again, like, I think we're getting into a place where you can't bullshit your way out of this one way or the other. And it's coming to proofs and facts. And you said the money trail, the conversations, evidence. It's still in that place of hearsay because it hasn't got to a point of necessarily like the facts and evidence. It's more of feelings and synonyms and and descriptors. So we are entering a territory that's very fine line in walking. And I think that is something that, regardless of the innocence of that these allegations are inaccurate and false that we've heard from the government, again, bringing it back to perception is reality. And the longer that this goes on, I will say that the federal election might be a nice change of tone of just what people hear and are talking about at the kitchen table or in the grocery store line. But I remember last federal election when people weren't happy with the UCP, how it impacted the CPC tone at the doors. And that might also have a play into the Conservative Party of Canada's result.
Your lips to God's ear.
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to whether this will play out, I just think, and I don't know, like I have never spoken to Athana about this case. Mm-hmm. If she
I don't think she's probably talking broadly about it.
Does she want to come on the podcast?
Yeah.
Athana, if you're listening, you're invited. Yeah. If she has proof of everything she's put in there, if she has recordings of conversations, if she has emails, if she has text messages, I cannot imagine a world where the government, whether they believe they're right or wrong, wants that to play out in court. Because just the evidence alone would be so damaging.
So you're operating off a hypothetical that, like, if that is true, this is the case. If it's not true, I think she's very much damning her reputation, right? Like making allegations and coming out this forceful and then not having all the proofs to back it up. She's rolling dice if that's the case on what this looks like. So maybe her whole strategy was to get this to settle, and that's why she wrote her statement of claim this way, hoping that the government might write back. Who knows? This is like a game of chess, kind of, in like what are people's rationales and how you might have written things, or if, maybe not taking the lawyer tone that you are criticizing the government of has its own strategy.
This was written by ChatGPT. Can you please help us get some better news?
Gosh, if we
need better coverage. Here's a scenario. Please write me a statement of defense.
Put it into ChatGPT and be like, make better. Then put this whole thing in.
I might try that.
See what it does. Then we'll post it.
I'm going to put this into ChatGPT, and I'm just going to ask it to analyze it. Or maybe I'll put in this one, and I'll put in the statement of claim and just say who's going to win. We'll see what happens.
Now, I use Perplexity, if we're getting specific.
This program is brought to you by, just kidding,
Dyson Airwrap and Perplexity.
Looking for a Botox sponsor. Anybody?
For Jupiter.
Okay. I think that's it for today. New episodes drop every Thursday morning at 5 a.m. So set your alarms. Don't forget to follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok.
And we will see you next week when we are probably in a federal election. But in the meantime, like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Discourse is hosted by Cheryl Oates and Erika Barudis. Follow on Instagram @TheDiscoursePod. Subscribe to the Discourse on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.